Welcome to eBible Fellowship's Bible Study. In this series of Bible studies, we'll be taking a closer look at the Bible's evidence for the completion of the prolonged Judgment Day and the end of the world occurring in the year 2033. And now here's your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann.
Welcome, everyone, to eBible Fellowship's Bible Study that is taking a look at the biblical evidence for the end in the year 2033. This is study number 37. Now, we have been looking at information, biblical information, that has been in the fullness of thousands of years. Perhaps the one we've spent the most time on, the time path that we've looked at the most, is from the creation year in 11,013 BC to the flood, and the time was 6,023 years. And then from the flood to the year 2033 is 7,023 calendar years. I also mentioned from the flood date, 4990 BC, to the cross, Jesus's first coming when he went to the cross in 33 AD, that was a period of 5,023 calendar years. So there's a definite pattern. Fullness of thousands of years, then an attached 23-year actual or calendar, could be inclusive time period. And that's because the 23 in the Bible is a number of tribulations. So God brings tribulation before the finality of the flood. Fullness of 1,000 years, 23-year tribulation, then destruction. Likewise, from the flood to 2033, fullness of 7,000 years plus 23 calendar years, then, according to much biblical evidence, destruction. And even going from 4990 to the cross, 5,000 years, fullness of calendar years, or excuse me, of thousands of years, plus 23 calendar years. Destruction, yes. Judgment on Christ as he demonstrated the death he died as the Lamb of God from the point of the foundation of the world. So those are very clear, and yet God does not always follow the same pattern. There is other biblical evidence or biblical information that we can look at that would be time related, that does not go to the fullness of thousands of years and may or may not have that tribulation number attached. But what happens is, when we look at the length of time between two key points in time, one, a biblical event from the Bible, the other, something that has been projected into our modern era, such as the end of the church age, officially in 1994, but, and I've mentioned this before, 1988 was the end of the church age, and then there were 2,300 days before the official end in 1994. And certain numbers, certain time paths that fall on these key dates, or on the year 2011 when Judgment Day began, or even on 2033, they will be a certain length of time, and then we break down the number of years. And I'll give some examples and demonstrate how we do that. And then the numbers that they break down to, they will be key biblical numbers found in the Bible, and the numbers have associated meaning. That is, like the number 40 in the Bible clearly is used by God to illustrate testing, and as well as judgment. And the same with the number 3 is used by God in the Bible to show purpose. Number 4 in the Bible is universality. The 4 points of the compass, the 4 points to the furthest extent of whatever is in view, or universality. It's worldwide. It's going to be a worldwide destruction, obviously, when God brings an end to the world. So before we do that, I want to one more time just point out the strong emphasis on the fact that Cain slew Abel in Genesis 4, verse 3 in the Hebrew. You won't see it in the King James. We're told it happened in the end of days. And then in Genesis 4, in verse 25, it says, "And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son, and called his name Seth. For God, said she, hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew." And then in the next chapter, chapter 5, verse 3, we read there, "And Adam lived 130 years, and begat a son in his own likeness after his image, and called his name Seth." So first of all, Cain slays Abel in the end of days. That spiritually represents what happens at the time of the end of the church age. Up until then, wheat and tares have been growing together. Brothers within the Christian congregations, and then brother rises up against brother and kills the wicked professed Christians, not truly saved. They're of the flesh, although they themselves are unaware of that, and yet through their false doctrine, their false gospels, they drive their brother, who Abel typified, and Abel was a true elect child of God. They drive their brother out of the congregations because the children of God can no longer remain. The churches have become just too unfaithful. The church has gone apostate as a whole. And we read in John 16, let me go over there. In John 16, this statement in verses 1 and 2, "These things have I spoken unto you." This is Christ who is declaring this, "that ye should not be offended. They shall put you out of the synagogues. Yea, the time cometh." Actually, the word time is the word hour in the Greek. And the hour of great tribulation is really what Christ is referring to. The hour, the last hour of the workday, wherein God will save a great multitude. Well, the time or the hour cometh that whosoever killeth you will think that he doeth God service. And isn't that something, how religious people, not true men, not those without guile, like Nathaniel, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no guile. What that means is Nathaniel was a Jew by birth, but more importantly, a Jew by new birth, as God gave him a new heart and a new spirit, therefore making him of the Israel of God, circumcised in heart, a spiritual Jew, and therefore counted for the seed in Christ, the promise given to Abraham to him and his seed. The seed consists of Jew and Gentile alike, who are the elect. They have been saved by God. Well, those who are not true men, but they're outward part of God's kingdom. They're in the church, and actually the church no longer represents God's kingdom, but it once did for quite a long time, for almost 2,000 years. Same thing with national Israel and the physical descendants of Abraham. They were outward representatives of God's kingdom, though most of them were never saved, though the nation of Israel be as the sand of the sea for multitude, only a remnant is saved. And what happens is natural-minded people get mixed up in religion, and that's what it becomes. It's just a religion. It's not any longer, neither the Jew nor the professed Christian within the church is identified with God and his kingdom. God has ended both relationships. He has nothing to do with them. And yet, those within may kill and think they're doing God's service. We could go back in, even during the church age, go back a few hundred years, when the Catholic Church was rounding up people for the sin of wanting to put the Bible in the language of the people, especially in England, putting it in the English language would and did cost a number of people their lives, as the church was behind the effort to arrest them, to charge them, find them guilty, and burn them at the stake, or kill them in various ways. And why did they do that? They thought they were doing God's service. And it's just the wickedness of man, that reprobate nature, the hard heart, the blindness of someone who, again, is associated with the Bible or associated with some religion and God, and they, in their zeal to serve their God, they think that they're justified in killing. Remember Saul of Tarsus. Saul of Tarsus, we read in the book of Acts, he hailed men and women who were after that way, the way of Christ. He was a Jew. He was seeking and persecuting the early Christians and arresting them and compelling them to blaspheme, and sometimes even unto death. It was Saul of Tarsus who stood by watching the coats of those who were throwing the stones at Stephen. You can't throw a stone very well if you're being your coat's kind of restricting your movement, and so they took their coats off to really be able to throw that stone hard and accurate. And Saul was consenting unto Stephen's death. He too thought he was serving God by killing, literally, physically killing. That has been the case down through history, and it always gives a bad name to God. It's not to say God has not himself ordered certain ones to be killed, like the man who picked up a few sticks on the Sabbath day in the wilderness, and Moses asked, what should we do with him? And God said, stone him to death. There is lawful execution, and God, the just God, will determine what is lawful and whom to execute. And there is unlawful execution, that those who are religious but not, again, true men, they're not true Christians. They just say they're Christians. If they go and take that step, like burning someone at the stake, or the Jews in the days of Saul of Tarsus stoning someone, no, God didn't sanction that. God didn't say that those who were killed in those instances should be killed. That was out of man's wicked mind. And it continues today. It continues today. We have people of the Muslim religion who kill in the name of Allah. And the God of the Bible, God calls himself Allah in the book of Daniel. It's a name for God. And God doesn't, of course, he isn't requiring that. People who kill in his name are trying to hide their sin. They're trying to hide the fact that the thing they're doing is contrary to the law of God. What better way to hide it than to claim I'm doing it for God? This is all for you, God above. I'm serving you. I'm just your humble servant that's going to take an axe or a gun or whatever, or a sword, and kill this individual in service to you. And it's just wickedness. Men do things in God's name all the time, and all the time that they're doing it. And again, it's not according to the will of God. They're basically being stirred up by the enemy of God, the enemy of his kingdom, stirred up by Satan to besmirch, to muddy the name of God. And so it's not hard to get the wicked men of the world, the secularists, the atheists, and to get them to, it's really the ungodly are the secularists, they are the atheists, they are the religionists in all these false religions, all the religions of the world today. None of them are true. God has ended religion, organized religion. He deals with his people one-on-one as individuals. And so it's pretty, in an evil way, smart or wise, again, wicked wisdom, for Satan to have those who are under his power and authority to enter into the congregations and join the church, and now they do the work, whatever the church requires, of baptism, of accepting Christ. And of course, these works never truly save them. The work itself is wicked. No man is justified by the works of the law, Galatians 2:16 declares. And so Satan gets his forces, his emissaries, in the congregations, in other religions that also are false. And now you have multitudes of people that the world out there, the billions of people not in these religions, they look upon what is done in the name of God in these various religions and in the corporate church, and they're horrified. They're horrified. How could God do this? And then say it's sort of like a little softball pitch that someone can hit easily. It is Satan serving to Satan, as now there is ammunition for the secularists, for the atheists, to deny the truth of the Bible, because look what is done in the name of the God of the Bible. And you see, it's an excellent tactic, very, very excellent tactic, yet it doesn't accomplish, or it never did accomplish, Satan's ultimate purpose, which was to prevent God from saving his elect. And God accomplished that purpose. He saved everyone that he had predestinated to obtain that salvation. And all of these tactics, these wicked tactics of the devil, they're basically amongst those within the darkness. They're all within the same kingdom of darkness, with all sided with the enemies of God, no matter what religion they've opted for, and they're basically pointing fingers at one another, and yet they're all traveling down the same road to destruction. It's just variations of a theme, whether the one traveling down the road to destruction is following the Muslim way, or the one traveling down the road to destruction is following the false gospel Christian way that is in 100% of the churches, or if the one traveling down the road that leads to destruction is following the atheistic way, or the secularists, and I don't even, who doesn't even think about anything. He just lives his day. This is the day, 24 hours, and he doesn't think ahead. He doesn't think any deep thoughts about where he came from or what lies ahead. It's all eat, drink, and be merry, basically. And you see, it's a wide road. It's a large road that accommodates all these false ways. So it's variations of a theme. Satan is generous to those who are or were under his power and authority, and he gives much freedom. You can choose whichever way you wish to travel down that road to destruction, just as long as you are actually on the road to destruction. It's only the elect who are not. But we're traveling down a narrow path, the way that God lays out in his word for his elect people. Well, Cain slays Abel, and then Seth is born, and Adam is 130, and the 130 points to 13,000 years of history, and the 13,000th year was 1988. The end of the church age. That's the time brother rises against brother, or more likely the wicked brother rises against the righteous brother, the professed Christian against the true Christian in heart, and slays him, drives him out of the church. The word synagogue in John 16:2 is parabolic. God turned Israel into a byword and a proverb. Wherever you find Judah, Jerusalem, temple, house of God, or synagogue, these references, they will have spiritual application to the churches and congregations. And so what we're going to look at is a time path that starts at this year that is 130 years from creation. And that would be the year 10,883. 10,883, if you added 130, you would have 11,013 BC, the creation date. So in Old Testament history, you count down. 11,013 is the highest number that there is as far as history is concerned. And now from there, you count down all the way to the birth of Christ, supposedly in the year 0, but a couple of mistakes in the calendar. There's no year 0, and Jesus was born in 7 BC on the Old Testament side as far as our figuring and counting is concerned. And I won't get into all that, but that's how we do it. You minus 130 from 11,013, and you get 10,883. And that number breaks down. I'll just give you the breakdown. We'll go over it later. From 10,883 to the year 1988, which figures because, again, the 130 years of Adam's age directs us to 13,000, doesn't it? 10 times 13, 130, and just add multiples of 10 and 13, and you get 13,000 in the year 1988. And the length of years is 12,871 minus 1, and it's 12,870. And if you were to break down that number, it would be 99 times 130. 99 times 130, and it brings you to 1988. 99 you can break down to 3 times 3 times 11. 3, purpose of God, doubled. 11 would point to normally the first coming of Christ, but in this case, to the what was in view with Christ's coming, atonement, and the work of Christ. This is pointing to the purpose of God for the work of Christ within the churches and congregations that completes in the year 1988. That's the end of salvation within the congregations, and we talked about that as far as 13 times around Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down, and the wall in the Bible identifies with salvation, the wall of salvation, Isaiah 26:1, and that's when the salvation ended in all the world's churches. May 21, 1988, day before Pentecost. Pentecost is the feast that the church age began on back in 33 AD, and before the next Pentecost in 1988, because Pentecost is sort of a renewal slip, the day before, God ends the church age. No further renewal of the churches and congregations being his representatives on the earth. The church age is over. The Spirit of God comes out and departs from the church. Satan is loosed. The spirit of Satan enters in, and God is the one who loosed him and brought him into the congregation for the purpose of allowing Satan to wreak havoc and destruction upon the churches of the world, and he does an excellent job at that. Well, when we come back at our next study, we're going to look at again the number I just gave, and I mentioned 99 times 130. It could also be broken down to 3 times 3 times 11 times 130, and you could break down 130 to 10 times 13. But I wanted to keep it at 130 so you see the significance of Adam being 130, and then 99 times 130 from that point. You just keep counting 130 years, 130 years, 99 times, and it takes you to 1988, 13,000th year of Earth's history, and all the spiritual significance of spiritual Cain rising up against spiritual Abel within the churches and congregations, and then historically, after 130 years, they had another son, Seth. Well, we'll look at that significance, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful, pointing to God's salvation outside the churches to save a great many people before he brings the final judgment on the world. But again, we'll have to look into this further when we get together in our next Bible study.
Thank you for joining us for eBible Fellowship's Evening Bible Studies with your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann. For more studies and information, visit our website at www.ebiblefellowship.org. Until our next Bible study, may the Lord's perfect will be done.